He snuck up on me. Hey, y'all. I am Christine Gautreaux. I use she, her pronouns. And today I am coming to you live from the ancestral lands of the Muskogee Creek, about a mile east of the Chattahoochee River. And we are back after a hiatus, the InterPlay podcast. So excited to be here with you today. And just so excited about the guest that I am about to interview. This has been a long time coming. So I'm going to go ahead and read her intro and get her up on stage, so we can get started and we can do some podcast interplay. Here we go. Sacil Armstrong is a self-care and social justice facilitator, integrating anti-racism with self-love and joy. Her class motto is no blame, no shame, no guilt, because those emotions get in the way of learning. By helping participants stay grounded and teaching emotional engagement skills, she increases their capacity to have meaningful conversations and create doable and effective anti racist action plans. She's the founder of Everyday Activism Habit, where folks get to practice being radically inclusive. Cecile is the Racial Equity and Transformation Director for InterPlay, and we are so lucky to have her, and I am so lucky to call her my friend. So welcome to the stage, Cecile Armstrong. Woohoo!
Woo! Hey.
I am so glad you're my first guest back after our pause. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. I am well. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm noticing I don't have my headphones on.
Okay. Well, your
Can
sound
you hear me?
sounds pretty good. I can
Okay.
hear you. Sounds pretty good. And let's take a deep breath before we do anything else together.
Thank
Let's take a
you.
moment to take a deep breath. Let it out with a big old
Ooh.
sigh.
Ah.
And as you
Hmm.
always like to tell folks, you want to introduce the next big breath?
Oh, I am happy to introduce the next one. All right, y'all. Check in with your posture. Notice if your head is over your shoulders, shoulders over your hips, your feet are flat on the ground. Notice your body and let your belly hang out like nobody's watching. And then take a nourishing belly breath. And let that out with a wiggle and a sigh. Whew.
Mm, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. We love to start this podcast out with some I could talk about. And for listeners or watchers who are new, I could talk about are an interplay form where you just say what you could talk about. It's the headline of the story, but not the entire story. Or I like to say the email subject, but not the entire email. You want to do a couple I could talk about, Cecile, so we can check in?
Yeah.
All right,
Mhm.
kick us off, friend.
Okay. I could talk about how my window is cracked right now and I am feeling the nicest breeze come through.
Mm. I could talk about my butterfly plant that is blooming this gorgeous orange right now, and I'm just waiting on the butterflies and hummingbirds.
Ooh. I could talk about my mom's first aquatic therapy yesterday and really wanting to be in the water with her.
Mm, I love that. I could talk about today being a big anniversary date for me, so I'm really being gentle and noticing like how much ease I need today.
Yeah. Yeah. I could talk about working with someone for the first time this morning and us giving each other grace for the awkwardness and discomfort and figuring out how to work together, by paying
Mm,
attention to our bodies.
right? I could talk about how excited I am about radical inclusion and what that means for our organization.
Hmm. You want me to keep going?
Sure.
Okay. I could talk about being excited at noticing the progress that's already happened, in addition to what's coming for interplay.
Ooh, ooh, I can't wait. I can't wait. Let's jump in, friend. First of all, this is a loaded question because I already know
Oh,
the answer, but I would
okay.
ask it of any guest. So, how did you get
Okay.
introduced to Interplay, and tell the audience about that?
Okay. You are to blame for this. So,
That's why I said it was a loaded question.
okay, the way that I was introduced to Interplay is the same way that I met you. Um, some guy who was random to me on LinkedIn sent a message to the two of us saying, I think you guys should get to know each other. And I looked and was like, I don't know this dude. I don't know this woman either. Okay. And was going to ignore it. But then you reached out and said, hey, you want to get together over Zoom, and meet? And so I met you. And we had an instant click, instant knowing each other, recognizing each other from past lives or something. And then close to the end of that conversation, you said, you're an interplayer. You just don't know it. And I'm like, what's interplay? I don't know what that is. And you were like, oh, you're going to be part of the interplay community. And then I think, what was it, 2 years later? I had done the intro to interplay. I had done live practice and was applying to be the racial equity and transformation coordinator at the time. So yeah, that's all you, girl. You manifested that stuff and I didn't
I
even know what was
love
happening.
it when a plan comes together.
I didn't even know what was happening.
Right? Well, when we first met on LinkedIn, I mean, the first thing that was apparent to me was you were already doing work. You were doing the embodied work
Mm-hmm.
um, in a way that I had never seen anybody do racial equity and transformation.
Oh,
And
thank
it
you.
was powerful, like with your company, everyday activism habits,
Mm-hmm.
and your no blame, no shame, no guilt, right?
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that was one of the things that stuck out to me from the very beginning of getting to know you and your work is
Oh,
how you
thanks.
move in the world. And
Oh.
so I feel so lucky that you are currently serving as our racial equity and transformation director
Oh,
because of the skills you bring to the table.
thank
And
you.
also, just that this work is so important right now.
Oh.
As on the national level, it's getting, erased or rolled back or
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
that the power and why it's so important. So I want us to have that conversation today.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. I'm always
about
ready to talk about that.
I know you are right, and when you think about and it's not without pushback, even within our own organization, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
when somebody thinks about interplay, when they think about body wisdom, then they think about it's play, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we play with tough stuff,
Yeah.
and this is something that impacts all of our everyday lives, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think of the right question to ask you around this
I'm giving you
about.
space.
Right? I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about because I know you have so much. It's part of the problem about knowing the guests so well. It's like which direction do I take this in? Because I know you could go into. Well, so first of all, why don't you tell folks about the no shame, no blame, no guilt, and how you weave it into your work at Body Wisdom and Interplay.
Okay. Well, my motto for teaching anti-racism and radical inclusion has been no blame, no shame, no guilt for years and years and years, even before I heard of interplay. Because one of the things that I found in my work is that when I was doing the workshops, folks were taking the lesson and appreciating the information, but then not acting on it when I followed up. And as I was following up and asking people, why aren't you doing anything with what you've heard? And they were afraid of making mistakes. They were afraid of causing more harm. This is from the white folks side, and then people of color were telling me that they were just exhausted. They just didn't have the capacity to reach out. And so one of the ways that I like thought to reduce the burden was to have this to explicitly say that when you show up in my workshops, there is no blame, no shame, no guilt in that space. I am not blaming anybody for the color of their skin. I'm not shaming anybody for the actions of their ancestors. And I am not guilting anybody for whatever you did before you walked into my classroom. And, you are walking in because you care enough to learn. And I am appreciating that. And so, whatever you had with you, leave it at the door so that we can actually have a conversation. And when I introduce that, a lot of times folks will cry They just really feel like, oh, I can let go. I don't have to wonder if somebody's going to attack me. I don't allow that stuff in my place spaces. And so people are like, I don't have to wonder if somebody's going to attack me. I don't have to worry about, how folks are going to react to me making a mistake, because, I hold that space. And I really believe that blame, shame, and guilt really get in the way of progress. They get in the way of people trying. Those are often weaponized by whoever's in charge to maintain the status quo. And so I just want to get that out the way from the beginning.
Mm, I love that. When you think about it, like, how are you using interplay and other somatic practices with your work, with your anti-racism work, to
Mhm.
change the world? Just
Well,
a little bit.
I've been using embodiment practices and somatic practices since I started doing this work. I don't even know how many years ago. I'm not going to name how many years ago that was. Um, and learning interplay, getting certified in interplay, has just deepened my ability to be able to share those somatic practices with people. Before I ever heard of interplay, we were doing deep breathing. We were spending the first 20 minutes of the class making sure that people were in their bodies before we ever brought up any of the stuff that makes people uncomfortable. I was giving people tools to manage their own, anger and fear and discomfort throughout the class, so that I do that up front, so that if you have a spot where it's bothering you, you can, step aside and let me do my breathing, let me go stretch, let me get up and run around for a minute and then come back to class. So I was doing that stuff before I ever heard of interplay. And now that I'm a certified interplay leader, I'm using the forms, I'm using the playfulness of interplay to bring that in, and not only do the somatic practices before and after, but in the middle of the lesson, that is part of the lesson. It's integrated into the teaching. So, yeah.
I love that. Well, what's your favorite form, or one you use on the regular?
Um, my favorite form.
It's hard to. It's so not an interplay question. What? Oh, let's rephrase that. Like,
Okay.
what form do you use on the regular?
Um, this is not. I don't know if this counts as a form, but I am still using the warm up a lot. I'm noticing that when I'm like not sure where to go or what to do, I jump right into the warm up. Yeah,
Mm,
that's like my go-to.
absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely counts, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I know that, being your colleague and your friend, you also use noticing all the time. One of our
All the
tools,
time.
right? All the
Hmm.
time. Like that,
Hmm.
take a nourishing breath and notice. And I also wanted to bring that language in as we're talking, because,
Hmm.
as interplay leaders, we're taught take a deep breath. And
Hmm.
we've been shifting some of that language lately to say take a nourishing breath. Do you want to
Yeah.
speak to that and to why?
Yes, yes. I want to give all credit to who did I get that from?
Probably
Because I
Gwyneth.
didn't make it up. Gwyneth.
Was it
Yes.
Gwyneth?
I want to give all credit to Gwyneth for that language. Um, I'm the Racial Equity and Transformation Director, and that includes being an advocate for the queer community, for the disability community, for any community that's marginalized. And Gwyneth, who is part of our disability community, said that not everyone can take a deep breath. And when she's unable or they're unable to take a deep breath, it bothers her for someone to say, take a deep breath, and they prefer take a nourishing breath. And I said, that totally makes sense. And so I have shifted from deep breath to nourishing breath. I'm still focusing on the tummy though, still
Right?
saying, let it hang out like nobody's watching, and then take a nourishing breath. And so wherever you're taking a breath from, that's great.
Mm, I
Yeah.
love that. And I love how it's a simple shift of one word, right?
Hmm.
That makes folks feel more included or
That
more
part.
welcome,
That part. Inclusion really
right?
isn't a huge thing like, oh, let's tear down the whole structure and rebuild something else. Making someone feel included can be as simple as using one word, but one word different, or giving a little bit of added space, to hear someone. It can be as simple as that. And the incrementality of shifting to radical or universal inclusion, you can do that incrementally. You don't have to say, let's throw out everything and then make something totally new and shake everybody up. You can say, let's do this one bit at a time. Let's do this one word at
Right.
a time, one step at a time, one breath at a time.
Well, and I love that you bring up incrementality because our creators of the interplay system, Phil Porter
Mhm.
and Cynthia Winton Henry, one of our tools is incrementality.
Which
And
I love.
right, changed my life. Literally has changed my life. And
Mhm.
so I think about that. I think about when you think about racial equity, when
Mhm.
I know, I've been studying and doing this work for a long time, and there's a whole body of work now. So it can be overwhelming. Like it can
Oh,
be like,
yeah.
whoa, where do I start?
Yeah.
Right. So I love
Mhm.
applying our tool of incrementality of,
Mhm.
what's one thing I can do. And one of the things you're doing as our director right now is our community practice series. Will you tell our listeners what the series is about and why you want them to join us?
Yeah. So we have Interplay has, I think it's 8 community practices that we pull out and we read before, at the beginning of a big event, or that we remind each other of at the beginning of a meeting. And this year, as I've been trying to think of different ways to get folks more engaged with radical inclusion and universal inclusion, one of the things that I thought of was, let's revisit our community practices. They've been our community practices for years. It's always good to revisit things, even things that are working, and see if they can be improved or tweaked or whatever it is. And so I thought having a discussion about the community practices one at a time and asking the question, is this universally inclusive? Does this leave room for harm? Is this, how is this landing in people's bodies? And so we've been meeting once a month since March. So we met twice already. Our next session is going to be June 10th. I am co-leading with Mike Purz, and I am so excited about that. And we're actually going to be talking about um, sitting with being uncomfortable, sitting with I can't remember what the actual community practice is, but it's about sitting with discomfort. Um, and so we have come up with some really fun ways to play with that. And I'm really looking for feedback from the entire interplay community. How do you feel about each one of these practices? What is it about it that works for you? What is it about it that makes you go, ooh, that's not quite it? And how can we fix that so that everyone can say, oh, that really lands. I feel seen. I feel heard. I feel like I can show up without asking for some kind of accommodation. And that's the goal at the end, for us to have a set of community practices that we can embody, not just talk about, and that people feel good in their bodies and feel like they can show up without having to ask for an accommodation.
I love that. I will put a link to our community practices in the show notes. But the one that you and Mike are going to be playing with is we practice embracing uncertainty and discomfort.
That
We know
one.
that discomfort and growth dance hand to hand. We accept that our way may not be the best or only way. We try to listen with curiosity and wonder rather than judgment. We use yes and language as a way to co create our way together. Mm,
Yeah. That
yum.
there's a lot in there to play with.
Right, right.
Mhm.
I will also put a link to those community practices in there. I was lucky enough to attend your last one and just so fun. I love that you are co creating these classes with different leaders in our community and
Mhm.
inviting our whole interplay community to show up and
Yeah.
to play with the practice and to give input. And you do a feedback survey afterwards. And
Mhm.
I just love this model. Thank you,
Oh,
Cecile.
thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank
I'm
you.
looking for ways to engage. I mean, I know that we have some folks that show up all the time, some folks that show up every once in a while for specific type of things, and then some folks that kind of just watch but don't necessarily engage. And so I'm hoping that we'll get some new folks engaged and get them to play more towards the center.
I love that. I love that playing more towards the center. When you think about folks that
Mhm.
say, why racial equity? Why can't we just show up and play together? Why do we need to have these conversations about
Mhm.
racial equity and transformation and radical
Mhm.
inclusion? What's your kind, gentle, short response to that?
Well, okay, I don't know about short, but my kind and gentle response is that um, the structures that are causing issues in the country and around the world are going to do the same thing within Interplay. We are just a microcosm of what's happening in the world and in the country. And so if we're not purposely thinking about how to be inclusive, then we're not going to be, because the world is set up for us to be exclusive. It's set up to be comfortable for the folks who um, whoever are dominant, whether that's able bodied folks, whether that's straight folks, whether that's white folks, whether that's men over women, whoever is the dominant culture, they're not going to see where other folks are uncomfortable unless they are intentionally paying attention. And so it's always great to intentionally include folks. And we talk about racial equity more, or we use the term racial equity more often than the others, because if you give folks a choice, at least in America, folks are gonna skirt the racial stuff and they'll like, oh, let me go help my friend with a disability, or oh, let me go help the LGBTQ community, because those are so much easier to talk about than race. And so we focus on racial equity, because if we can get that right and get folks comfortable with that, the rest of it is gonna fall into place. Because the tools that hold people down and the tools that separate folks are the same tools. So if we can apply it to the thing that's hardest to talk about, then the rest of the things are going to fall into place.
I love it. Well, and I love that you're using Interplay to teach it too. Like when we come together for these sessions, we come together for community practices, we come together at the leadership gathering. We're playing with it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
we are walk stop running together, and we are having back and forth. I could talk about around it, and
Hmm.
we're doing dances on behalf of it, and we are embodying it.
We
Like
are.
so we can then dance it out into the world, which I
Yeah.
love. So,
Yes. Yes. We got to get it in our bodies. Because if we can't get it in our bodies, then the folks who don't know anything about interplay are not going to get it in their bodies. So, yeah.
right,
Hmm.
right. Ah, oh my goodness. All right, one more question before we start going towards close, because this
Okay.
podcast is usually about 30 minutes.
Okay.
So, when you think about interplay and you think about transformational experiences,
Mm.
what bubbles up for you?
Whew. When I think about interplay and transformational experiences, I think about applying the forms and the tools to the really hard discussions that allow folks to get out of their heads and worrying about what other people think and worrying about saying the wrong thing, into that shift in their body of, oh, this is my role. This is how I can help. And or oh, this is how I can let that go so that I can be present. And that shift right there just is causes a domino effect. When you can get out of your head and thinking that you're going to be wrong and what everybody else is thinking about you and all the things, and just take a breath and sit with your body and say, ooh, yeah, something about this situation needs to shift. And I have the power to do one small thing to make it happen. And I can do it in community. That is such a powerful thing to embody. And that's what I think about, because that's what it takes to transform.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Oh, that is perfect. That is a perfect way to end this episode, Cecile Armstrong. Thank you so much for this conversation today. Thank
Oh,
you
thanks for
for
the invitation.
all who listened in. Your host today was me, Christine Gautreaux, Interplay's Integrity and Innovation Director. Our theme song that you heard at the beginning is Echo Lady Who by Interplayer Eric Chappelle. And we are delighted to be a part of your somatic journey as you delve into your own body's wisdom. You can find out more at interplay.org, and we hope you join us for the next conversation.
Yeah.